Are you struggling to figure out what order to list authors in the byline of your research manuscript? Are you debating who should be listed as the first, last, or corresponding author? Or are you wondering, what is the big deal about author order anyway, and why does it even matter? In my nearly 15-year career in scientific and medical editing, I've had many conversations with researchers about authorship, especially about author order. I've seen productive conversations, healthy debates, and also heated disputes about authorship and author order. So in this second video of the 3-part series on authorship, you'll learn what the different author positions are and why they are important. And you'll get some tips on how to best order the authors in the byline of your manuscript. And if we haven't met, hello, my name is Crystal. Since 2011, I've collaborated with researchers to help them publish in high-impact journals and secure federal and foundation funding. And I've trained thousands of researchers and other professional writers all over the world to equip them with the principles, resources, and systems that they need to write well. So in the first video of this series, I shared the ICMJE criteria for authorship so that you can determine which contributors should be granted authorship or an acknowledgement. And in case you haven't already watched that video, I'll add a link to the description box, including a link to the ICMJE criteria. Now, once you know who will be listed as an author, you then need to choose the order of those authors in the byline. If we look to the ICMJE guidelines for guidance on choosing the author order, we find the following statement. The criteria used to determine the order in which authors are listed on the byline may vary and are to be decided collectively by the author group and not by editors. So basically, it's up to the author group to choose the order, but this is the extent of the guidelines. They don't give a real recommendation, a method, or a system that you can use to figure out the author order for the byline. Now, you might be able to find some guidance in author guidelines, style guidelines, or even some unofficial conventions. But I'm going to share with you some strategies that you can consider for ordering the authors in most scientific and medical manuscripts. But of course, check the journal to be sure you follow the requirements. So what are the different author positions and what is their significance? The two most coveted positions are the first and last author positions. The first author is most often the person who has contributed most to the work, although in some fields the first author is a supervisor or principal investigator. This first author position is one of the most coveted positions because it is the first name that readers see on the byline and in the references list. And sometimes it's the only name seen, such as in a citation in APA style or a call out in the text, such as Einstein et al. The other most coveted position is the last author position. The last author is usually the supervisor or principal investigator who oversaw the project. In some fields, this person is the second author, so be sure to check the author guidelines to make sure. But by and large, in the medical sciences, in the health sciences, the last author is the principal investigator. So this last author position is also one of status of running the research program, which is why it's often the principal investigator or supervisor. Now, all other authors are the in-between authors, and these authors are usually listed according to their relative contribution to the work from the most to the least. But how do you determine that relative contribution? A common strategy is to take a mathematical approach. So here you start by choosing which items will appear in the manuscript. And this applies to everything in the paper, from the data collected and analyzed to the amount of writing in each section or the time and effort needed to write a particular section. Then you want to determine how much each author contributed to those items. And then you can rank the items based on their importance to the manuscript. And then you can calculate each author's total contribution to the manuscript and then order the authors from the most to the least contribution. Now, this is a great strategy when the manuscript has already been written and you need to be as objective as possible. But in the next video, I'm going to give you a step-by-step strategy that you can use from the start of a project. So be sure to subscribe so you're the first to know when it posts. So the other author position that you need to consider is the corresponding author. And the corresponding author is the point of contact who takes primary responsibility for communicating with the journal. So they are often responsible for submitting the paper and ensuring all the required information is included in the submission. The corresponding author also receives all updates related to the submission, such as the status of the submission, the reviewer's comments, the final decision, and any coordination with the editor or other journal staff. In many cases, the corresponding author is the person who oversaw the project, so the last author, but sometimes the corresponding author is the first author and occasionally another author on the byline. And sometimes you can have more than one corresponding author, but whenever possible, I recommend having only one corresponding author. So what happens when you have two authors who contributed equally and are tied for an authorship position? This can happen with any author position, but I've most often seen it with the first author position, sometimes with the last author position, and rarely with the in-between authors. But because the first and last author positions are the most coveted, the most challenges can arise when equal contribution applies to the first and last author positions. So in the case of the first author position, the first author is the most coveted because it is the first to appear and may be the only author a reader will see. So imagine that this is your byline. Albert Einstein, Marie Curie, Charles Darwin, Gregor Mendel, and Rosalind Franklin. The first two authors have equal contribution, so Albert Einstein is the first author, and Marie Curie is the second first author. When this paper gets cited, you see Einstein's name with Einstein et al. Or Einstein with the publication year in APA style, but you won't see Curie. So even though these authors have equal contribution, Einstein is going to get more attention and prestige. And that paper might even be strongly associated with the first author's name. So I remember in graduate school that we would say things like, "Oh, have you read the Smith paper?" So the first author position is prime real estate in the author byline. So I highly recommend, whenever possible, to make sure that you mitigate the possibility of having an equal contribution for that first author. Now, what about the case of the last author position? In this case, Gregor Mendel and Rosalind Franklin would have equal contribution. But when this paper gets cited, we don't see either of their names. So they won't get the extra attention that, say, the first author would get. But when the last author matters is when someone sees the full author list. They can jump to the end of the list to find out what lab the work was likely done in. So the last author is going to get a little more credit for overseeing the project than the second last author. So similar to the first author position, you want to avoid having an equal contribution for the last author. But let's say you have an equal contribution in really any position of the byline. How do you choose which author goes first or second? One option is to list them alphabetically, or you might list them by their seniority in the group, or you might order the equal contribution authors based on the degree of difficulty that was needed to carry out a specific part of the project. For example, if a particular experiment took more work or took longer or more resources, or you might consider that a particular author needs the author position to help them get tenure or promotion. I've certainly seen cases where someone with equal contribution allowed the other equal contribution author to get the better position to help support their career. But just be sure to avoid a pressured authorship scenario like I discussed in the previous video in this series. And you can also combine these approaches in a way that works best for your team. And you can get creative. You can settle the debate on authorship however your team wants to. For example, at Stanford University, there was a researcher who had 2 people with equal contribution in his lab. And so the authors played 3 games of Mario Kart, and the winner was given the first authorship slot. So you can get as creative as you like in a way that your team can support. But next week, I'm going to share a strategy that you can use to plan authorship from the very beginning of a project so that you can avoid the conundrum of equal contribution. And if you liked this video, you might also like this one about the criteria that contributors need to meet to qualify for authorship. And if there's something in particular that you'd like to learn more about, let me know in the comments. I create these videos for you, so I want to make sure that I'm creating something that you will find valuable. Thank you so much for watching. Have a lovely day, and I'll see you in the next video.